Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another video at my YouTube channel and blog. This video was originally created for Simon Says Stamp, and it's going to be a monthly feature for their blog. And I'm so thankful that they're allowing me to share it here on my YouTube channel and blog as well. So I hope you guys will really love this. This is going to be a monthly feature where I try out mail art. So I'm going to start out with the We Are Memory Keepers punch board, the 1, 2, 3 punch board, and I'm looking at the envelope sizes and making sure I have the paper size just right. So I'm going to cut down my paper to 8 1/4 square. And I'm using some Strathmore Bristol paper. I'm using this paper in particular because I'm going to be using some Zig Clean Color markers, and this paper also holds up really well to water, so it's great for watercoloring. So I've lined up my paper at the 3 5/8 mark over on the left side of that punch. I punched my paper, and then without moving the paper, I'm going to use the scoring tool that comes with the board and run it along the line A. I think that's what it is, yeah, envelope line A. So then I rotate my envelope and I move that over until the score line matches up with a little groove that's up by the punch. If you don't want to deal with that, just remember it goes to 4 5/8. So the first measurement was 3 5/8, and then you rotate and go to 4 5/8. And you do the same thing as you rotate this around. So now I'm back to the opposite side where I started. So I'm measuring at 3 5/8, and I'm punching and scoring. And I'm going to do that last rotation and bring it over to 4 5/8. And then I'll go ahead and punch and then use that score line A once again. This is going to create my envelope for a standard size A2 card. So I have all those score lines. I'm not going to fold anything down yet, but I am going to tape the envelope down to a board. This is going to not only kind of map out the center area where I'll be working, but it will also help prevent this paper from warping while I do some watercoloring on top. So I'm using some additional post-it tape to mask off the flaps just because I'm doing some ink blending and I want to protect those areas and make sure they don't get hit by any of the ink. So I'm starting out with squeezed lemonade distress ink and a mini round blending tool. And I blended that kind of around the center area. Now I'm using carved pumpkin, and then I'm going to bring in picked raspberry and then seedless preserves, and then I'll be ending with chipped sapphire. The idea behind this blending is that I'm going to use that stamp set from Lawn Fawn and have a little scene over on the left-hand side of my envelope. And there's going to be a fairy that's kind of floating up above with her little fairy wand. And I would want the center area to look like it's glowing, like something magical is happening in the center. And that's also where I'm going to have the mailing address. So I want to make sure that this center area is nice and bright and the color kind of fades in from the edges of the envelope. I think this is a really fun way to make sure that the envelope is still legible, so that it is going to be able to go through the mail, through the postal system, but that it's still fun and something creative. So I'm going to stamp this flower here, but I'm going to take a baby wipe and just take off the bottom portion so that I can extend that flower stem and make it really tall. So I'll go ahead and stamp that down. And then I'm going to stamp the fairy. This is the one that I mentioned before. And I also added her little fairy wand off of her hand. And then I took that same flower stamp and I did the same thing I did before, just wiped off the ink from the bottom portion so that I can have it extend down even taller. So I'm using a waterproof black pen to draw in those lines. And then I'll be able to watercolor over the top of these and I won't have any black ink smudging. Using that same pen to draw in some ground underneath the little house, little fairy house. And then I'm going to go into coloring. Like I said before, I'm using some Zig Clean Color Roll Brush markers and also a water brush. This is a small aquash brush from Pentel. And I really love to use a water brush with these markers in particular because they blend so well on Bristol paper. They blend like a dream. And I also wanted to mention that the ink blending that I did, it does behave a little bit differently on Bristol paper as opposed to a regular cardstock. Bristol paper has a little bit of a coating on it, and that's what prevents any moisture or ink or things like that from soaking into the paper too quickly. So as you're ink blending, you have a little bit of time to really get some nice blends. I know I sped up the video, so maybe you didn't see it, but there were a couple times, especially when I was using seedless preserves, where my ink blending tool came down pretty sharply onto my Bristol paper, and it left like a stamp of the foam. But I was able to kind of blend that out, even though the ink was already on the paper. And you can't necessarily do that with regular cardstock, so it just behaves a little bit differently. I really like the blending. You get a really soft blend on Bristol paper because the inks don't absorb quite as quickly. So if you really want to have a really faded, ethereal blend, maybe try Bristol paper, even if you're not going to be watercoloring, just because I really think, especially for those who are starting out with ink blending, you'll have a much better result and it will be a little bit less frustrating to get what you're looking for. So after I had all of those little areas painted in, I took my water brush and I just added some water circles, water dots, kind of up into that ink blended area. Distress ink reactivates with moisture. So this is going to give me some nice white spots. I thought it would sort of look a little bit like fairy lights or little twinkly lights or anything like that. Just give it more of a whimsical look. And this is a way to do that without having to add sequins or things like that, because of course that would come off of the surface of the envelope when it is mailed. So I'm adding more of those little dots, and I'm just using a paper towel to dab up that color, and you're left behind with those little droplets. So now I'm going to take some Post-it tape and I'm going to kind of do a practice run of the recipient's name. I'm going to be sending this envelope and a card, once I make it, to my friend Kelly Marie, who is one of the co-owners of Lawn Fawn. And so I thought I would send it to Kelly Marie, care of the Lawn Fawn business office. So first I'm stamping out the letters from that Concord and Ninth stamp set because I want to make sure I get the spacing just right. And then I can move back up to my envelope and kind of place it where I think where I'm actually going to have it be stamped. And then I can use a pencil and make a little mark so I know exactly where to begin stamping. This is going to give me a better idea of where to start. And especially if you've already finished the rest of your envelope and you're adding this as the last step, it's always a good idea to kind of do a test run. So I particularly love this stamp set because you can customize the name, and there's also the scripted, very fancy lettering, and there's also these capital letters. So you can mix those together and it looks really nice. I'm going to use that same waterproof black pen that I used to finish the flower stems and the ground under the house to write in the address of the Lawn Fawn business office. So as I go about this series for Simon Says Stamp, I will be using some different business addresses or addresses where people have given me permission to share them in videos online. I'm usually very particular and careful about sharing addresses online because you just never know. But for this, I thought it'd be kind of fun to send it to different companies and use their stamps on the envelopes. So in this case, it's going to be going to Lawn Fawn because I used that fairy stamp set. So I'm going to take off those blue strips of painter's tape, and then I can assemble my envelope. And I love taking the tape off and take masking paper or masking tape off because it's so fun to see everything all finished. So I folded up the sides, and then I put a little strip of Express-It tape. This is a really strong adhesive. And I also cut the tip of that bottom flap so that it was nice and straight going across the envelope. And you don't have to do that, but I decided I wanted to. So there's the envelope. I'm going to leave it open until I have a card to put inside. I only have a couple things to do to finish off this envelope, and one has to happen before the other. I've added my postage stamps onto my envelope, and now that everything is completely finished, I'm going to add some Distress Microglaze. This microglaze is particularly formulated, or it works well to cover areas of artwork that you want to make sure that they're water resistant. Like I showed you earlier with those little dots that I added with my water brush, this distress ink, if there's water added, if it gets a little bit of rainwater on it when it's going through the mail or anything like that, it would really ruin my envelope. So I want to make sure that I have a nice slick surface of this microglaze to protect all of my stamping and watercoloring and ink blending. So One thing I did want to mention is that you want to make sure that everything you've worked on is completely dry. You've given it some time to dry so that it doesn't smudge anything. I had a little bit of kind of softening of the Kelly Marie area because I think that pigment ink wasn't quite dry. But in the end, when I buffed the microglaze off with a paper towel, it really cleaned up a lot of what had been smeared around. So all in all, it turned out really, really well. And the microglaze really does protect all of that artwork that I've done previous. So it's a really fun step, and it's the last thing you want to do, especially after your postage stamps, because otherwise those won't adhere. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I will be back in 1 month for another mail art video. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.